Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having a conversation with me today, Katie. Would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. I am Katie Calver. I work for Marriott International. I've been with Marriott for about 12 and a half years now, which is kind of crazy to think about tenure at this company, but I've loved it. Sat in a lot of different roles that have given me a lot of different opportunities. And I always say with my role and how I've grown, I started in email marketing. I was curious about the entire customer journey. So I ended up in a lot more roles around orchestrating and omni-channel experiences and customer strategy and customer delivery. And today I sit in an organization focused on personalization, data activation, and marketing activation. And I sit at the nexus of strategy, technology, and activation, which is a really powerful place when we think about the digital marketing experience today.
Well, and how do you feel data and personalization really play a role in that 5-star customer experience?
I usually take it from a customer lens, and I think about, I'm sure you travel and I travel, and you think about what you do when you travel and how you start searching and you have an idea and you want to take a trip, and what does that mean to you? You start looking at destinations and you start looking at properties, and you might be just looking for inspiration or you might be looking for deals. And if you're a frequent traveler, I want companies to recognize that bit of information about me so that they engage with me the right way. And I want to be provided with options and recommendations that recognize that I may sit in multiple states. I often quip that I'm a multifaceted lady. So I'm a businesswoman. I might travel for my work. I have a family. I love traveling to places where I can eat cheese and I can drink wine. And then I always plan to have some sort of activities to occupy, mine or my family's time. And I want, the companies that I engage with to know that, and I know that I may search in the app and I'm truly engaged in app experiences, and I'm saving things and I'm favoriting things. And then when I arrive for my stay, when I switch from that kind of I've made a booking and I go into the arrival state and I step foot on the property, I want to be recognized for that too. Every year that I've been there, if it's my first time versus if it's my 10th time on this property, I want companies to know that I'm a loyal member. I've joined the membership program and I have high status. So when I put on my marketer hat for my traveler hat, everything I just talked through is data, and I break it down from that marketer's lens, and I understand to deliver a truly 5-star experience, I can use that data. I can use that information from that little story, I just told about what I expect when I travel and the types of things I'm giving to companies and I'm expecting back from companies. You heard that how frequently I travel, if I'm a first-time stayer versus a repeat stayer, if I'm a loyal member, that I have a family, that I love food and wine, that I'm interested in activities and other offerings to enhance my stay. So all of those things are things that we as organizations can use and can break down, and they become signals or attributes that then can deliver 5-star experiences. So that's how I think about what being data-driven means and how we connect that to, in my industry, 5-star guest experiences.
Well, and you've touched on this a little bit, but there's all of these different channels that you're interacting with leading up to the stay, and then perhaps when you walk through the door. Mm-hmm. How are you connecting all of those data points across that now face-to-face experience that happens with guest services, and as you're actually in a property? How are you connecting those in a cross-functional way and making sure your team has the resources that they need to be successful, so when you do walk through the door, they know that you're a loyalty member, they know that you like wine and cheese? How do you send those signals over?
I think there's a lot that has to do with definitions and ensuring that we are all singing from the same song sheet, right? So how do we ensure that the terminology we are using from team to team to team, you know, I work in a big organization. So you rattled off a couple, you rattled off CEC, and then we have digital channels, and then we have marketing, we have brands, we have operations, and there needs to be a connective thread through those. And I think that's what the importance is of, it's great that we have data, but if we don't have organization, structure, definition, clarity, and visibility into that, then, you know, to your point, we're not able to access all of that information to make those experiences happen. So we work a lot on focusing on that foundational and the importance of that foundational ecosystem so that it can feed each of those functions of our organization so that they can respond to whatever the need is across it, whether it's someone in operations who's receiving a guest request in the stay, someone at the CEC who's getting a customer complaint, you know, me in marketing, how can I take both of those signals and do something with it? I can send a push notification. I could quiet marketing for a guest who has a negative experience, but it all has to sit on a foundation that is clear and organized and understandable, and then can be consumed for, you know, for each of those teams to activate against.
And then how are you taking that and turning it into an ROI metric as a group?
We actually start with the ROI metric. So I think that that's like a foundational piece of our organization. When you have everything is data as your mantra, and you start and end your experiences with data, then you start to realize, well, in order to deliver experiences, I need to start with an outcome. I need to start with an ROI that I have to drive. So, you know, when I think about my organization, we have things that we say around, I need to drive hotel revenue, or I need to drive app downloads, or I need to increase channel engagement, and I need to do it from X to Y. And that actually gives us the flexibility to be able to solve for that outcome in a variety of different ways. You're not coming at it saying, I need to send an email, right? Or I need to put a message in the app. You're saying, I need to deliver this value, this outcome. And when you start with that, you get the analytics team in early, and they help drive, okay, how are we actually going to measure that outcome? And how can we support you from ideation, from strategy, all the way through to in market, and ultimately being able to measure it on the back end to provide that feedback loop for you to optimize in the future.
That makes a lot of sense, that you don't want to necessarily set a metric that is unmeasurable and have that conversation happen in a vacuum. You need to be able to work cross-functionally from the beginning of planning all the way through the actual implementation of it.
And the reality is, I think for a lot of marketers, if you were to ask some of them, because I don't think that's a adopted methodology, if you were to ask them, what is the objective of the activation you're trying to put in market? Some of them would say, I don't know. I feel like more often than not, we get all of them. And you say, all of the KPIs of our organization, your one marketing execution is trying to drive for. And I think that's the disservice we do when you don't start with a clear objective, when you don't start with something that you're trying to drive. You're either trying to solve all the world's problems, or you actually don't know, and there isn't a clearly defined metric. So you can't say, when you get all the way through this, and it's hard to, you know, sometimes get marketing in market, right? So when you get you've gone through all of this labor to build this campaign, to execute it, to make sure it's personalized, and then you can't measure it, that defeats the purpose, right? So I think we have had so much success pivoting to clearly state your objectives, and you can have multiple, but don't try to boil the ocean. That sets yourself up for failure. And then having an analytics partner drive all the way through so that you can measure it and say did you do the thing that you set out to do?
And do you feel that now that you guys have been doing this for a while, that you're seeing an actual shift in behavior from your cross-functional teams, that they are coming to the table with, okay, I understand how to get from point A to point B? Or are you still educating? And do you feel like that's something that's evolving because of the way technology evolves?
I think it's really evolving. If we think about how, you know, marketing has evolved over the past 15 years. And I'll take, email for an example, because that's where I cut my teeth. We went from not knowing it was everyone, right? Batch and blast. Everybody saw the same thing, to now we want to shift to highly personalized communications. And we want to put that in the hands of the marketers. I think we're still figuring it out. We're trying to give marketers the skill set to ask the right questions, be curious, analyze your data, and think about, what does this mean for you? And I often tell, my marketing partners, when we're stuck, I said, well, think about how you travel, or think about whatever industry it applies. Think about how you shop retail, or think about how you go to the grocery store. All of them apply. You're a focus group of one, so you can at least give some insight to help ask those types of questions. But I think we're still figuring it out. And then once you get those questions answered, what do you do with it? The technology has exploded. We have a lot of tools in our toolkit to be able to do marketing and to get things into market. And I think from a data perspective, that has really blown out a lot over the past couple of years, where, yes, we have big data, and then you pivot and you're like, well, what do I do with this data? How do I use this? How do I use it effectively? Is the juice worth a squeeze kind of methodology, right? Like, is it worth going to this level of granularity? Will I get that return on the investment, or is there a capping point for it? So I think these are all things we struggle and wrestle with as we advance our technology. More becomes available to us. So we encourage a lot of collaboration. We encourage a lot of conversations about it, but also we iterate. We try to have a methodology of, don't try to do it all. Let's make incremental progress and get that feedback cycle faster, so that we can truly test and learn and ideate more. And I think that's helping our marketers kind of see the art of the possible, because there's a lot of possibilities. We have so many levers. So how can we make sure to use them effectively is the next step for us.
Thinking about that, the iteration, and touching on something that you've shared with me before, is you treat data as a product. What does that mean when you are rolling it out with other teams cross-functionally, and how do you communicate that?
Yeah, it's funny, when I've started having a lot more exposure to what it like that product mindset, and it starts, like I said, with those outcomes, and you can extrapolate the thinking and the methodology for data too. So I want to be able to use data. I want to be able to access it. How can we create the pipes and the systems to be able to access it? Our data teams have to think about that. Don't treat everything as one-off executions. Think about the bigger picture. And we do a lot of ideation around, don't just solve for one use case. Think of how it can apply to other use cases. How can you build something? And that is truly the product mindset, right? So how can you build something that is applicable and has capabilities, and that application towards a myriad of activations, I think, has been where we have been successful. So you start with that outcome, or what's the problem you're trying to solve, is another way we'll frame it up when we talk about, kind of in this case, data as a product, or we talk about process as a product or capability. You have to kind of start with the thing you're trying to do, or the need that you've identified. And then, like I said, you can figure out there's always multiple ways to solve the problem. There's multiple ways to get to that end solution. And that's kind of becomes your testing bed, right? That's your learning agenda to get that, to see if you can answer it and which one was the most successful. So by taking that methodology on, that's historically been tied to technical product build, and applying it to the same principles to different parts of our organization, whether data or process, it's been really interesting. And I think it's unlocked a lot for our teams. We've been able to drive a lot of value.
So would you say that when you think about your data as a product, are you building out a data roadmap of we're working with this set of data today and we have these use cases and we have a future plan that we want to drive towards, and we're being really thoughtful and intentional and not having random acts of data or random acts of marketing coming
That's
back?
a good way to put it. Yeah. You don't want to have random acts of marketing. Random acts of marketing are, like I said, not always measurable, or they don't actually meet that goal. Or, they're just kind of out there in the ether. When you're purposeful, on what you're trying to deliver against, you end up, I think, driving value a lot quicker than you would have if you try to solve it, the traditional way of thinking. I think I don't love a roadmap because I think it boxes you in. So I tend to, even my roadmaps are rooted in that outcome that I'm trying to drive, right? It's rooted in, okay, I have $50 million I need to drive, or X million dollars I need to drive this year, this quarter. Here's my tactics that I believe that will get me there. And some of them might take longer and some of them might take shorter. So that's kind of how I think about building a roadmap. And I think that's how we've talked about it from a data perspective. We have our CDP team, for example, thinking about how do we build a set and suite of attributes that the marketers can take advantage of. So they have a set of outcomes they're trying to advance and deliver each cycle. I won't even say quarterly, because we try to have flexibility in the system to adapt to the changes that we might encounter. But yeah, at the end of the day, we're all trying to march towards an end goal that the collective group feels will drive the biggest amount of impact. And then the roadmap takes shape to be, here are the ways in which we believe we can move the needle or really drive the business forward. And that takes the shape of our roadmap.
And that definitely makes sense. It almost empowers you to bring that like marketing agility to life through the plans that you are putting in place. And knowing that we are in this world that is evolving so rapidly with the use of AI, and how does that integrate with data? How are you today, envisioning that those changes that are happening real time in market are going to influence consumer output down the road?
I mean, there's a lot that is going to change with new technologies coming on board. I think at its core is we have to make sure that our foundation is set up, because you could drop any new technology on bad data and bad foundations, and you won't be able to do anything with it that's meaningful, or that in some cases may make sense. Some of the outputs of those models might actually be kind of garbagey. So how do you adapt for that? How do you be flexible? So I think when I look at what we need data collection. We need to be able to organize it. We need to be able to access it. These are critical foundational components as these innovations come online. And I think it's been really exciting to see in my organization that principle of data kind of as a product rallying around the fact that you need a strong data foundation to make any of this happen. I think it's really important that we keep our eye on maintaining good practices for it. So what I mean by that is we sometimes see the shiny new innovation and we go and we innovate on it, but we don't take the rigor and the time to continue to optimize it, to maintain it, to focus on it. And so I want to make sure, and that's one of the things that I watch for, that we don't set and forget, that we're always looking at this. We're always curious. We're always pushing the boundaries. And I think that also helps us when we look at like innovation coming down the pipeline. We can adapt, we can be flexible. And then we can challenge the innovations further and see how far we can push it to realize our vision.
I love that. I think what you're saying is that, you know, a foundation is a foundation, but it needs to be built upon. You're not just setting a foundation and adding a bunch of tools on top and saying, I trust this indefinitely.
Yeah.
You're building that foundation and you're saying, okay, like let's add a layer.
Yep.
Now let's add a layer. So your building is getting taller and taller as you set things up for the future.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, you know, I think there's challenges within that. We run into that old idiom of you build the house one room at a time. You don't want to do that. You want to know that your North Star is a house, right? And so what's the path to get us to build that house, and how do we build it flexibly so that people, you know, take the analogy too far, but people can move from room to room, and you want to rearrange the furniture, or a new person wants to move in. Like, you have to adapt and be able to account for that in kind of your ecosystem. And I think the hard part is historical philosophies introduce a lot of rigidity into the system. So I think about it as instead of being exclusionary with our practices, like open the floodgate and then filter, right? So we do a lot of thinking about that, because we've gotten ourselves in trouble when we've taken too myopic a look at things, and then we've immediately said, oh, well, what about this example, or what about that example? And the teams will say, oh, well, we didn't build for that example. So we need to account for the idea that you have broad set of things you want to solve for, and how can you create that accessibility and flexibility so that we can deliver like a myriad of experiences.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, thank you so much, Katie. I really appreciate the time you've taken with us today.
Thank you. It was great chatting.